So here I have all my pins spaced out evenly. There are 12 sticking out. There should be a gap of 2 pins between each of them. You can either tape or hot glue on the first wire. I would recommend, since we're actually going to be moving backwards when we wind, so we would be moving the winds over this way as we go, I would recommend actually gluing or sellotaping the first bit of wire onto this other side of this pin here, so right here instead of right here. You want to leave yourself plenty of slack just so that in case it breaks you have plenty of space to work with and don't have to rewind the whole coil because one of the winds is short. I have hot glued on the wire and we start our first wind. So we put this spool through the donut or the ring and then we bring it onto this side of this pin. So right up here, don't know if you can see that. So I pulled my first wind through. You push this all the way up against that pin. You do not want any slack. Then we put the spool through again, making sure not to bend or kink the wire, because if you damage it you will have to start the whole thing again. And then we move it onto this pin here, again making sure there is no slack. Then we place it through. Then we move on to this one here. You need to make sure that your wires never cross the center, then you know they've gone wrong. Every time you do a wind, it's basically following the same angle as the previous wind. So you can see this is the beginning, goes up here, goes down here. Then this one does the same thing across. So we've moved it across here, we tighten it again, you place the spool through, again being careful not to damage anything, and then we wind the wire onto this pin here and place the spool through again. We go across to this pin here. Now every time you do a winding you need to make sure it is as tight as possible, so you don't want to be stretching the wire, but you want to have it very taut so that we don't have any loose bits, because this will allow us to have the tidiest, best performing coil possible. So I moved it through there. I push the wire up to make sure it's in line. Pull it a little tight. Then I move it onto this coil. Then I place the spool through. You can see this seems to be a little loose, so when I finish this first set I will tighten everything before I start my second winding. Anyway, we go onto this pin here, tighten it, make sure it's even, we go across to the next one. Pull it tight, put it through. Make sure there are no kinks. You need to be very careful when you put the spool down because wire will want to wind off it. So now I put the wire over to this one here. Pull it tight. Put the spool through. Now to this one here. Through. Pull it tight, make sure you don't catch on any wires and damage them. And now I'm onto this one here. We are almost finished with our first winding. So on our final wind, right here, we put the spool through, pull it tight, and then wind the wire back onto the first original pin, as you can see here, on pull it tight. So you can see it's on the other side from the first wire, but when we're done with winding the coil we will move this wire over to the other side of the pin. When you've done this initial wind, you want to make sure everything is tight, all the winds are pushed up against the pins, and then you can go on and follow the same pattern over and over again. Go slowly because you want to make sure you do not by mistake move the wire to the wrong pin, because then you'll have to backtrack, and that's very annoying because of the complexity of this coil. So go slowly and be as accurate as possible, and do whatever number of winds you're planning on doing. If you're doing your first coil and it's a smaller one, I'd recommend just doing 9. On this one, I will stop when I've done 27 winds. This is what your coil should look like after you have 9 winds. I'm going to keep on going until 27, but 9 will be fine for a smaller coil. I would recommend that you do as many as possible though, because the more you do, the more powerful the coil will be, and easily make the effects more easily observable. I would recommend that you write down the number of winds you've done on a piece of paper, and each time you do a wind, fill in a number or a mark on a piece of paper. So this is what the coil looks like after 18 winds. I have exactly the same number of winds on this coil now as on the other one, so I'm 2/3 of the way. I will have to move the pins around, as you can see there won't be enough space to wind all 27 on and then have space for the others, for the other coil. This is what the coil looks like with 27 winds. I've finished the first coil. You need, when you're finished winding, to make sure you leave plenty of slack on the wire, and then you'll need to cut 2 wires from wherever and tin them, and then wrap the copper filament from the coil around a wire, and then flux and solder it on. And you can see here I've put heat shrink on. This is this first wire, so I've soldered it on and then moved it, I've bent it around and hot glued that so that whenever it's resting it will not damage the wire and break it. We'll start the other coil, which starts on this pin over here. So when you've completed all the windings, press the pins back in and look at your diagram, and you'll see 1 pin over you have to move, and pull all those pins outward to make it more obvious. So I'd push this one in and pull this one out, and then I'd obviously glue the next wire over here and start winding backwards, the same way that I've been winding back. This is the rodin coil completed. I didn't have enough wire to do the 27 winds I wanted to do, and I also was running out of space, so I have 18 winds on one coil, this one, and 27 on this one. So I didn't manage to do the 27 on this one. So you can see it looks pretty full compared to my original, which has a lot of gaps. Anyway, I will build another one with a finer gauge wire so that I will be able to fit all the winds in.